Hey, everybody. Welcome to the TEConnect podcast. I'm John Martin.
And I'm Dean Reverman.
Dean, you know what the most important question of our time is?
Wow.
It's not Coke versus Pepsi. It's not Star Wars versus Star Trek.
Okay.
It's not Apple versus
Android. These are deep philosophical questions that we need to have answered.
But the biggest
but it's none of those.
No, it's RFID versus barcodes.
Yes, right.
But I mean, is it really though? You know, like... it's been a running gag ever since I started at BlueStar. I know it's been for a long time before. Like, is RFID getting ready to take over? Is this the year of RFID? Is it finally here?
Who needs barcodes?
Right.
We have RFID.
And I think we've kind of established, and we'll get into this, that there's no such thing as like one replacing the other. Like,
right.
I think there's a happy marriage that can exist between the two.
I think we're going to have to be there.
Exactly.
Yes,
so we're going to talk a little bit about that today.
All right, sir.
We have a couple guests with us. We have Todd Muckerheide and Mark Wyatt from CDO Technologies. They're going to come in and tell us a little bit about their experience in the channel with RFID and AIT and barcodes, all these solutions combined, how they work together. Sometimes when you might need one, you might need another. You might need a marriage of both. So it's kind of a VAR's guide to selling RFID, but also maybe understanding when RFID might not be the best solution out there, and it's okay.
We need experts to tell us that, because I don't know.
It's not us.
It's not me.
No.
It's not you.
As we say every episode, we're not the experts. We're just these guys that host a podcast and bring people on to talk about things that we don't understand.
Bingo. Yep, absolutely.
But isn't that every podcaster? Let's be honest.
Yeah,
so,
there you go.
All right, so that said, it is time for us to plug in and get connected.
Welcome to the TEConnect podcast. It's time to get connected.
All right, as I mentioned, we have two fantastic guests with us today to talk about all things RFID, barcodes. Can't we all just get along? You know, it's the that's kind of what I thought about it with this.
Coming out of the pandemic.
It feels like everybody's always like, it's got to be one or the other. Like, does it though? It doesn't have to be. I think these guys are going to help us out with this. First of all, Todd Mukerheid is the technical solutions sales consultant for CDO Technologies. Todd, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your role at CDO, and maybe your experience with RFID in the channel.
Sure. Well, thank you for having us today. So Todd Muckerheide, CDO Technologies, we're basically a systems integrator, and one of the areas of expertise that we kind of dabble in is this automatic identification technologies, AIT. And it's all, part of the barcode RFID, just like what you were saying. And I get a chance to work with organizations and people who are having issues just around, mainly asset tracking and key things of where's my stuff. And the big question becomes, like what you said, should I do RFID? Should I do barcode? When should I switch to one or the other? And what's going to be best? And it really boils down to just application and kind of educating our clients, and then getting to know them and their process. And as a technical sales consultant, that's what I do on a daily, weekly basis. And I'm just here really to help anybody who wants to learn a little bit more about it. And again, it's all about education first, and then let's plug and play and figure out which technology works the best.
Love it. Our other guest is Mark Wyatt. He is the founder and principal consultant for the Quantiv Group. Mark, welcome to the show. Thank you for being on with us. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your role, and maybe kind of how you're connected with CDO and their work in the AIT space.
Yeah, sure. I started Quantiv Group recently, and what my role is to basically help Todd to generate demand, generate leads, new appointments, help him get connected with the right folks. But in addition to that, my background is in development and ERP implementation and data integration, and done a ton of that type of work locally and even nationally. So I'm also, helping with the solutioning of it and any kind of technical support in the sales process that Todd might need. And laying out some of the technology and the processes involved in RFID.
That's awesome, man. Imagine having a partner like that with you.
Right?
You're going out there. You're trying to do a little hustling and find some contacts, find some customers, and you got someone like Mark who can go out and do some of that work for you and bring it to you.
And understands the technical side.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, can we call him a unicorn? Is he a unicorn? It's like, that's a rare set of capabilities that you're bringing to the table.
Never been called that before. Thanks, guys.
There you go. Hey, we might start getting some emails from folks like, hey, can I go work with Mark? Can I get in touch with him? Like, you have to fight through CDO and Todd there to get to him first. Yeah. Well, thank you guys both so much for being on here. As I mentioned at the top, this whole kind of ongoing, it's almost become a gag at this point of RFID versus barcodes, and we keep saying at some point RFID is supposed to replace barcodes, right? And honestly, I think before we ever got to that point, we'd probably find some other technology that replaces both of them,
right? Yeah.
And to that point, I mean, it makes sense because there's, Todd, as you mentioned, there's applications where it makes sense to use RFID, and there's applications where it makes more sense to use barcodes instead. And I know, like, there's always been this concern about, hey, is there a cost problem here? And I know that's not as big of a factor as it used to be. The cost for RFID has gone
getting
down
better every day.
Exactly.
Kind of thing, yeah.
So Todd, I'll let you kind of kick things off here and just tell us, why are barcodes still necessary, and maybe give us some examples, some specific examples where one application is clearly superior to another one.
Sure. So I will pick up on what you just said, cost. Cost still is a factor, and the cost effectiveness of barcodes versus RFID is something that has to be considered. And really the key for a barcode is that they're used with more tracking low-cost assets or items. So even though RFID tag, to your point, is significantly dropped in costs because the volume's now more and bigger after 20 plus years of having RFID out there, it still, in some senses, can't compete at the very, very low end where barcode is. So barcode still wins out when you're trying to tag and track very low cost items. So for example, just because everybody's familiar with it, the grocery store, right? So grocery merchandise, cereal boxes, milk cartons, all that sort of thing is still barcode because it's cheap. It's easy to print. You're doing high volume, and then you scan it on one of the grocery scanners. The other example would be maybe in a manufacturing environment where you've got very low cost, inexpensive parts that you're trying to track, and maybe you've got hundreds of thousands of them. Okay, so it's just easier to track and at lower expense to do that. Otherwise, you'll get underwater pretty quick if you're trying to look at your operational budget. Say, I want to put an RFID tag on everything. Okay, can become expensive. When you're looking at comparison with barcode. So that's one example. The other interesting area is how the technologies work. So in a barcode, it's more precision. Okay, so a barcode label requires line of sight, and it only scans one single item at a time. So again, back going to the grocery store example, when you're in front of the grocery scanner, you put your Cheerio box in front of it, it sees that laser light come out and scans that barcode, and you only have gotten that box, right? You didn't scan a box that was 5 feet away from you or something like that. So you're just getting a single scan of a single item. Whereas RFID technology, it does not require line of sight. It just kind of goes out, the RFID wave goes out in a V-type shape or a cone shape, okay? And so it can scan multiple items at the same time. And it can have distances of 5 feet, 10 feet, sometimes 25 feet, depending. And so if you use the grocery store analogy again, let's say you had an RFID grocery store scanner, and you had RFID tags on your cereal boxes and milk cartons. Well, what could happen is that you could scan not only the items in your cart, but also carts that are 4 or 5 feet away from you, across the aisle, or behind you, or in front of you. And so that wouldn't be good. You want to be charged for your neighbor's groceries, right? So the idea of barcode versus RFID is more in the lines of, do you need the precision of barcode where you're singly scanning just one item, or do you want an application that needs multiple items scanned all at once? Okay, maybe at a distance, large distances. So that's where they kind of differ in what they're trying to accomplish as a technology.
And what I like about that, Todd, some other examples that we've seen are like, for example, supply closets, and kind of that cost benefit starting to get to the point where, maybe some supply closets we've seen in like healthcare and or firehouses, where you have assets or a supply closet that, you need to make sure that everything's in there, the inventory levels. It's becoming more economical. And to your point, you can wand, an RFID reader in a supply closet and very quickly gather what inventory is there, making that whole process much more efficient. But to his point, there isn't another supply closet, down or just 5 feet away. So you're accidentally scanning 2 supply closets at the same time. But anyway, yeah, we're starting to see some of those solutions, as it relates to some of those items. But Todd, I guess, the cost is a factor, but the cost of RFID tagging and stuff like that is coming down. So it makes it a little bit more, approachable to consider a supply closet where maybe, it's not a box of cereal at $1, but some supply closets, there can be multi-dollar items that are in there, but it still makes sense to tag them.
One thing we like to talk to folks about is what are your critical assets? Okay, what are your critical assets that you want to track? And your more, typically, again, your more expensive assets. Is it that important to track a $2 item that if you got lost, you can misplace it pretty quickly, right? Or is it more difficult and do you need to tag that $200 item that's critical to your operation? And if you do misplace it for an hour, boy, you've shut down a production line. Or you can't have like a lot of times people do it for vehicles. If the vehicle has to go out and make a service call and you can't find your particular calibrated wrench or something, right? That's the items that you want to really tag because it's critical and you want to know where those items are.
Right. And you'd want to know in a certain process, where is that item at any given point in time and location. So outside of like a grocery store, there's so many different scenarios that'll happen within manufacturing or industry where you've got these items and you need to know, how fast are they moving through a process. So that's why a lot of times we get into situations with the technology part of it where, we're wanting to look at what is the process and how can we improve it? How can RFID technology improve an existing workflow or process of items?
Let me pick up on just a point that John, you made earlier. It can be a marriage, right? So in many environments, it's very complex. So you can have both a barcode technology being utilized to track an asset and also an RFID technology being utilized. So there can be a happy marriage of the two.
Yeah, I agree. I like that we're talking about this from the critical asset standpoint too, because I think that's a great talking point to help a customer understand if you're going out to a customer and trying to help them understand which they need and why, and why maybe you're trying to pitch them on RFID. And you mentioned two, I think, very specific and good examples of medical supplies and firehouses, two places where supplies that are very critical. If you're missing a critical piece of medical equipment, how important could that be? That could be a life or death matter. Same with a firehouse. If you're missing a critical piece of equipment that you need,
a hose connector that was left at the last scene and you don't have it there.
That kind of stuff is super critical, where the ability to know that you are very accurately tracking something, not just depending on, did my barcode happen to get scanned? Did I happen to catch it at the right angle? Was it hidden behind something and I missed it maybe? But being able to know, like, hey, I did that quick little swipe scan over RFID. I caught everything I needed to catch. I know exactly what critical supplies I have, what's missing, what I need to get reordered right now, or I need to go locate immediately as quick as possible. So I like that critical aspect of it.
Yeah, and that also can tie in with compliancy for both of those organizations. Sometimes they have different compliancy as far as time logs or where something was at a certain point in time. And so it helps them with that whole part of it of being compliant and not having to do that process manually.
Very good point. Well, Todd, you mentioned briefly earlier this idea of like the production line. So, Mark, I kind of want to turn to you a little bit on this one. The idea of like the process automation, and you kind of referenced process a little bit there too, and how RFID can help out with that. So, explain a little bit how barcodes and RFID can essentially replace like manual keystroke entries and some of the manual processes that might slow things down on a production line that we can speed up a little bit by using RFID.
Yeah, sure. And many times, we go into organizations and they're using spreadsheets, they're using Excel. and they're keeping track of things manually, keying things in manually. That's not unusual. So a lot of times it's a matter of helping them to see that this doesn't have to be, some big pie in the sky type of solution. It can just simply replace what you're doing with that spreadsheet, and those entries that you're making to track inventory or track items or track, assets that you have. Those can be, you could hook a scanner into USB port, and that stuff can just be entered just as if someone was keying it in on a computer. But it's basically reading RFID items in the area and putting them in the spreadsheet for you. So many times what we try to do is come in and solve a small problem, and then after doing that, then we can kind of start to talk about some of their processes and how this actually ties in to some of their critical processes that are somewhat manual. Many times it's not a matter of automation versus manual. It's a combination of both, and there's kind of the sweet spot of, the more technology you put in it, the more costly it is. So you want to find out how much technology can we spend to make it somewhat automated so that we're getting the ROI, and we may still have some manual involved.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. And I'm going to throw a headline out here real quick because I think it's appropriate for what we're talking, or at least the angle that we're talking about here. I was reading, I think it was just released today from Thomas Industry, but here's the headline: 83% of North American manufacturers are likely to reshore their supply chains in 2021. Wow. That's up dramatically from what the same polling that they did last year. So to me, that's kind of where Mark is going. When you think about the processes, so if you have all this manufacturing that is the desires to bring it back onshore, and the commentary there is pretty well known. I mean, this pandemic really exposed some weaknesses and some supply chains that are ongoing right now, even today. So if the desire is for manufacturers to reshore, well, there's opportunities there. And the other thing that we learned is that knowing where parts and pieces are in a process is pretty daggone important. Right. If you don't know where whatever the next piece to make the whole thing whole is in the process, well, that's an issue. So RFID, I think there's an opportunity here in the process of manufacturing that is really unique. And so as manufacturers look to reshore, maybe they'll think re-technology too, and implementing some new technology as it relates to RFID. So Mark, I'm sure you're talking to folks, right, on a daily basis, or Todd, about that, and how they can work this kind of automation in through RFID through the process, right?
Exactly. And what's the one big other thing in manufacturing that's a problem now is finding good people to work, right? Mm-hmm. So again, you're picking up this, how do we get done the same amount of work that we still have to do with less people? And so technology becomes a player in helping solve that issue. But then to your point, you got to find the right technology. And I think that's where Mark was talking about too, is we've got to learn a little bit more about your process when we come in to talk with you so we can understand it, and we can kind of plug the right technology into your solution or into your process so we give you the right solution. And then I like what Mark was saying too, it's all about the ROI. How do you get a return on investment on this solution? And that kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier. We got to track your critical assets, or we got to look at your critical assets. And what do we really need to do? What's keeping me up at night? What's my primary issue here that's a problem? What's my critical assets that I got to really track that are shutting down or delaying my production line? For example, if I've got the wrong raw material in front of that production line, and then I produce something, now I've got 20,000 widgets of waste. Boy, couldn't that have been solved ahead of time if we would have scanned it? Either had a barcode on it or an RFID tag and scanned it and validated it. Hey, we've got the right raw material in front of the right production line. Now let's go ahead. But we made a mistake. So there's many different aspects of this that can be, satisfied by using the right technology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Well, I think we've kind of already sort of answered this question in many different ways already, but maybe kind of, streamline the answer here of how to, and Todd, I'll direct this with you. How does AIT help businesses kind of do more with less?
Sure. Well, actually, one of the biggest issues that we talk about with folks is where's my stuff? Just simply, where is it? So I've got a facility that's 100,000 square feet, and I produced, 500 of these widgets yesterday, but now I can't find them. There's some corner in the warehouse because the shelving space was limited, and I had to go put them somewhere. Johnny and the forklift went and put them somewhere. So now I can't find them. So typically what happens is that, okay, it's got to ship out. We got a half hour to ship it out. What do? You make 500 more, right? Because you can't find them. So you go ahead and do that. Now you've duplicated, you got redundant material or finished goods, and now you just caused a bunch of waste. So one area is by having an asset tracking system, whether or not you use barcode or RFID, you can quickly locate those items because we're tracking. As DeMark said, when we scan it and we inventory, we see where it's at, it gives it its location, it timestamps it. When did you last see it? So again, it gives a person a starting point to go back and say, okay, last time I saw it was on shelf A, I had 50 of them. So then you'll know. So that's one key component of just better visibility to what you have and where is it.
Yeah, yeah. And another big part of it, of the do less with more type thing, is the just-in-time inventory. And, having a lot of times companies have to have this buffer of stuff because they simply don't know where other things are. So maybe they have 4 or 5 of the same thing because they simply can't always find it.
Right.
Or they build this. So with RFID technology or the asset tracking, you really can whittle away a lot of that buffer that you generally need because of not having those technologies. So you really can move more toward like a just-in-time inventory or just-in-time assets.
Yeah, and let's do a quick little sidebar here because I'm interested, and I'd be interested in your take as it relates to this. So, I've been reading about RFID, and we all know that RFID and maybe the world of sensors sometimes gets blurred. The ability for an RFID tag and or whatnot to have what I would call sensor data on it. Maybe it's temperature or, those types of things. And certainly as, in production of items. I mean, of course, we saw it with the COVID, with the, what am I thinking of here? The we all got in our
vaccine?
Thank you, the vaccine. Holy moly. That was a stretch for that.
Only the most popular word of the year right now.
Right? Yeah. Brain cramp on that one. But anyway, I mean, we saw that in the need to have sensors on the whole process,
for the temperature.
You knew, exactly. You knew where it was going. So guys, talk to us a little bit. I mean, do you see RFID's world kind of expanding from just a tag that has some serialized information on it to a sensor type of technology that maybe, Mark, is going to be critical for that just-in-time inventory, right? In order for it to be JIT, it needs to be at a certain temperature. It needs to be something like that. So are you guys starting to see that in your world, kind of this blurring of RFID and sensors out there?
Yes, and they exist, right? So there's different, so the breadth of RFID tags and what it can do is broad and getting broader. Okay, so from standpoint, like you said, we deal a lot more with the passive RFID tags that have a little bit of information. I mean, we're talking about the basics where the tag itself is just like a license plate. It just has a little microchip on it. It says my chip number is 123, and I'm identified as John Martin, okay, in my database. But there are tags out there that can hold a bunch of different information and pieces and stuff like that, and sensors and tags, and get relayed that information to a database. So you can travel the whole breadth. You're right. Temperature sensitive tags that go on vaccines or pharmaceuticals, definitely there's a huge industry for it. We're not a big player in that area, but I know it's a growing part. It's also a growing part of the whole food industry as well,
right?
Because you don't want spoilage, and all that stuff going on. So it's certainly, and the key factor is when you start talking or start looking at your issue, what is it? And in learning, again, what's the primary issue of my process that I'm trying to solve for? So if I do need a temperature sensitive tag, it's going to be a little more expensive, as it relates to the RFID or whatever, but is it really necessary? Or is there a better way to solve that problem? But if it comes down to that, sure, there's tags out there. And as you guys know, there's thousands of tags, shapes, sizes, and passive versus active, all sorts of different types.
Well, and sometimes it could be an orchestrated solution because many times RFID basically can give you information of where is that asset or where was that asset. So when that item, whatever it is, has an RFID tag and it moves through a certain area and gets read, there's a couple of pieces of critical data. The license plate number, so to speak, or the unique identifier of that item, and then also a date timestamp of when it passed through a certain area. So if you have temperature sensors and humidity sensors in certain areas, you can know by triangulating, so to speak, that data, what the temperature and humidity of that item, at least the condition it was in at a certain point in time. So a lot of times we see it's a matter of knowing what the need is and maybe orchestrating a couple of different technologies and then bringing the data together in a unified dashboard.
That's it. And I think that, the orchestration of a technology solution is at the end of the road where it's going to be.
Yep.
You can lump on some of these additional technologies, but it's usually some mix, right, of those technologies. But I personally am just fascinated. I mean, of course, we've had the acronym IoT out there for forever, and seems like now, and just the desire. We've talked about other examples like the cannabis industry where you are literally tracking the plant from seed all the way through
every
its process.
step. If you just clip a leaf off, you've got to keep track of that.
Exactly. If it moves, 10 feet from this room to the next room, it's got an RFID tag on it, so it knows exactly where it is.
Yeah.
You know exactly where it is in the process. And, I just think stuff like that is just going to continue. That's not going to go away.
Well, it goes back to what Mark mentioned earlier about compliance. That, if the industry you're in is heavy on compliance, heavy on regulation, then there's probably a much stronger need to have that kind of like very accurate, specific tracking down to date and time stamps, down to knowing whether something left this room and went to that room, because that can be very critical to passing, major audits that determine, whether you are in regulatory compliance, with some federal guidelines or state guidelines or something. So big important stuff there.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about some applications, and we've been talking a lot about asset tracking, obviously, but it's what most people think of when they think about RFID in particular. So, Todd, are there any other applications that are benefiting from RFID right now that maybe we're not thinking of, that some of our partners might want to be investigating or thinking about too?
Sure. And kind of, as I mentioned before, just the raw material validation, right? You want to make sure you're using the right material at the right production line so that you don't have downtime or you don't have any delays and that you don't, create waste when you didn't need to. The other one is kind of along the same lines, shipping validation, right? You've got all your finished goods, you got them queued up in the shipping dock. You want to make sure that you send the right product to the right customer. Huge part of customer satisfaction, getting it right the first time. And also obviously reduces shipping costs because you're not shipping things twice or three times. So that's two right there, kind of go hand in hand. The other big one is an area where it's a real common complaint where, and talking about other technologies, your ERP system. The common complaint is, why is that consistently wrong? I look at my ERP system, I see 5 widgets on shelf A, but when I go out there, there's only 3 widgets, right? Or there is 5 widgets, but they were way down on shelf Z. How did that happen? And a lot of times what happens with ERP systems is, back to Mark's point, some people are just doing Excel spreadsheets and then hand jamming all that information and data into the ERP system. And they only do that once every day, maybe once every 2 days. And so it's not timely information at all. So it almost becomes meaningless because, as you guys know, in different environments, boy, things move quickly. And especially in a manufacturing process where you're constantly shifting with your raw materials, your finished goods, your assemblies, whatever you're doing, it's always in motion. And so to have a technology that can keep pace with that is important, so that you're getting timely data and that you're getting accurate data. You're not getting a guy who's working very hard and fast, and he types in, instead of 13, he types in the number 31, right? Now you think you've got 31 items when you only have 13. Yeah. And so that's a big mistake. And so it's cutting down on some of those human error type of things, and it's making then your ERP system, smart, more accurate, right? And more reliable, basically, what it boils down to, so that you can order the right stuff. You can replenish your inventory on a timely basis. So I think that's a real key one that we see as a common problem. And one final, the other one not a lot of people think about is, but automatic gates. We've got a client who has a big yard facility, is off kind of a main road. And, you know, they used to use the old badge system where the driver would have to pull up and show his badge or scan his badge and the gate would open. Well, their trucks were backing up, causing issues. And so they went to an RFID where they put an RFID tag on the windshield of the truck. There's an RFID scanner out front 20, 30, 40 feet ahead of where the gate is. It sees that truck coming by, boom, sees it, says, yep, he's acceptable. Gate opens, he just kind of keeps rolling right through. So it's kind of a fun one, easy one that, you know, very impactful though for the whole process.
Yep. Yeah.
Reminds me of the local Mike's Car Wash. I had one of those tickets for a while where you got the unlimited washes and it was stuck in my window. I just drive through a certain spot, the little sensor picks it up, opens the gate, I go right on in, get my car washed.
Yep.
I don't have to do anything, I don't have to interact with anybody. Yeah, something simple like that.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, I wanted you to kind of add on here because you mentioned you're kind of an ERP expert. So, you know, is there anything else you want to add to how AIT, RFID, and barcodes both are helping enterprises out with their ERP?
Oh, sure. I wouldn't say expert, but I mean,
more than us. I can promise you that.
I mean, I know them well. I can integrate with them and that type of thing. But yeah, maybe I am after 20 years. But anyways, yeah, the thing that I want to emphasize is that the integration of this data into the ERP does not have to. I mean, there's a whole gamut, a whole spectrum, you know, from like totally automated to somewhat automated. And, you know, as we're getting data from the RFID system, as it's scanning these items and going through the readers, I mean, what we've done with our software is we can output a simple spreadsheet of that data. So if a person wants just that and put it on an FTP and have it picked up and put into the ERP some other way or even manually imported, that would be like the lower end of the spectrum. Very easy solution, not real heavy in technology. On the other end of the spectrum, I mean, you know, we can take that data and build ETL, ESB technology, and it can automatically populate the tables in the ERP system. And, you know, just as if a person was typing that in themselves, depending on, you know, what that data is that's coming from the readers. So, you know, we really try to look at what the need is and how heavy or light the technology needs to be, and especially if someone's just getting started in it. You know, we don't want to, you know, create, you know, technology that is so cumbersome and is going to take so long that they really don't even see a benefit for a long time until they get all this integration done. So we really are able to be very nimble, you know, when it comes to that piece of it.
I think there's a very good point there that I think we've talked about a few times before, which is this idea of don't sell somebody something just because you can, because you want to, and because it's cool or something, but because there's an actual need for it, you know, because it's
always better that way.
Exactly. Because to Mark's point, you give somebody something that's maybe just more or too much more than they actually honestly need to in their operation and in their enterprise at that time. It just becomes more burdensome than anything. And eventually they either just drift away from it or they get a bad taste in their mouth. And they might have a bad taste of working with you. Like, well, these guys sold me this thing that I just don't really even need. And it's just more than we were trying to accomplish. And now I'm just annoyed by it.
Right. But I also like the incrementalism approach to it. You know, one of the areas that I was going to throw on the table that, you know, RFID, I think is starting to see some applications, if we go back to manufacturing, would be like in the testing environment, for example. So if you're a VAR that's working, you know, you have a manufacturer and they're wanting to test a certain amount of their products as they're coming off the line. Well, RFID gives you that advantage of a unique identifier on a particular item or a particular group of items. And, you know, you can scan that, get that information. And to Mark's point, maybe it's just a simple process of getting that into your ERP. So now you know, oh, this batch was tested in this time and it can help with your quality control, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that you're going to start seeing some incremental uses of RFID. And as we kind of kicked off the whole show here, talking about kind of the blend, you know, it's not barcode versus RFID, but it's using complementary technologies as per the solution. And I think that, you know, as resellers become more able to embrace some of what RFID brings to the table and sensing brings to the table, they can offer some of those types of solutions.
Yeah. The one more thing I'll throw in also, because I have to do it from my time as a BDM working with RFIDs who, you know, were a different approach to RFID that we don't talk about as much, which is credentialing, identity management, authentication.
Access control.
Exactly. And, you know, and most people think of it as, all right, I've got a badge that lets me scan into a door to open a door to get into my building, or to identify that I've shown up somewhere. But there's so many more applications you can use for it. It can be used for something as simple as logging in and out of a system. You see that a lot in healthcare these days, where
like I got something on the printer or something like that.
Exactly, print release. But it even can get as complex as like in a manufacturing or an industrial environment to help kick off processes, or to activate logic controls, or to identify whether you are someone who is qualified to run a certain piece of machinery, or turn on a forklift. So there's a lot of different applications with the access control and like authentication identification piece there of RFID that I don't think people think about as much. So it's another great question to throw out to your folks is, hey, we're doing all this cool stuff for you from the asset tracking side of things, but do you need anything to make sure that the right person is accessing the right thing or starting the right operation? Because believe it or not, the time it takes to like keystroke in a username and password over the course of a year is actually adds up. Like
well, especially if it's something you got to repeat and access to a specific area.
Exactly.
The advantages from a security standpoint, they're there.
Exactly. So
yeah,
that's my 2 cents that I'll throw in there. And the folks at RFID, if they're listening, would be happy to hear that I shouted them out on that one.
Yeah, I mean that applies too to stuff. I mean, is this the right stuff in the right place?
Yep.
Right.
Is it authenticated? And we had a manufacturer that we had to actually do that with certain chemicals. Were these the right chemicals that need to go into this this process? So RFID can actually be that logic gate to say yes or no, as far as authenticating things as well.
Great point, Mark. I was going to bring that up as well. Again, if we have all this manufacturing that's going to reshore, knowing the origins of where the materials that are coming in, do they suit what you're trying to do? You say it was a chemical processor that you were working with, Mark. And they needed to know the inputs and validate that. That's going to be critical.
Well, that's the kind of stuff where you make a one tiny little mistake and you could be messing up. I think of healthcare. We always preach about in healthcare, like the scan a vial before giving someone a shot, or before giving some medication or something. If you're not doing that kind of thing and you're just hoping that you got the right thing and matched up to the right person,
that doesn't fly.
No, it doesn't. It could, at worst, it leads to somebody dying. At best, maybe they get sick, or you just do something wrong, and you get some liabilities, going on there. Why mess with that if you don't have to? If you can perfect the process to not have that kind of error possibly pop up.
And that's what makes me excited about RFID into the future. I mean, I just think it has some unique properties that it brings to the table that really help enable those kinds of things. As manufacturing grows and comes back or whatnot, just the whole process, it demands that type of accuracy and visibility that we've talked about. Yeah.
Well, before we wrap up this main conversation, are there any other, anything else that we should be discussing around AIT and RFID that we maybe don't normally think about, or questions we don't typically ask?
Yeah, I'd just like to pick up back on the compliance factor that I think that Mark touched on earlier, because it's a simple one. I mean, and you can think of it in a simple way as we work with some of our clients about just accounting audits. I got to know that my furniture is in my building, or maybe I'm an organization that has multiple branches or multiple clinics and healthcare clinics and stuff. I just want to take a quick inventory of all the offices and office furniture and old stuff, new stuff, that sort of thing. I even had a customer ask if they had some special art on the wall that was expensive art, right? And they wanted to account for it and want to know how to track it. And so there could be simple things. Assets are assets, right? And so that's a critical asset for them. So it's just simply, complying to your accounting audits, or if it's based on regulations, you can certainly, because everything's timestamped, again, going back to our earlier point. So you can grab that data and put it into your ERP or your spreadsheet, whatever you want to do, and show that as a compliance factor that you've met. So that's an area that we see that people kind of tend to forget about a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
That's a good one.
Mark, anything else you have to add?
I think along with what Todd said, I think the compliancy is a big one. We also, I think, just real quick, really interesting, we've had law offices, believe it or not, where we've put RFID on their case files, because they still use those manually and move them around the office, and they had to figure out where were these case files. So sometimes we can find surprising applications where you just really didn't even think that you could have an RFID implementation.
Nice. There's an episode of Law and Order I want to see. Like, hey, we were going to help you get off from this murder, but we lost the case file that would have set the precedent, that would have gotten you out of this. Sorry. Ching-chong. You know.
Yep. Now, that does happen, believe it or not. They misplace files. I mean, if you think about a law office with four or five floors of attorneys, right?
Yep.
It's going to get, one person comes by and takes it and says, I'm going to work on it for 2 hours, hands it off to the next person for 2 hours, and all of a sudden it's traveling through that office space and nobody knows where it's at.
Yep.
Yeah, right.
I believe it. Yeah. All right. Well, good uses there. All right. Well, this is a good conversation. Before we get to our recurring segments, I want to, as always, thank our sponsors here on the TEConnect podcast, Elo, Epson, Honeywell, and Zebra. We could not do this show without you, so we appreciate your support. Hey, as always, too, if you like the show, leave us a 5-star rating review on Apple Podcasts. Like and subscribe. Follow us if you're watching us on YouTube. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe to BlueStar's YouTube channel. We do all kinds of fun, cool stuff there.
Absolutely.
Cooking shows, trivia, just cool little video stuff we're doing. We're always
streaming all the time.
Fun stuff.
There you go.
Exactly. And of course, if you want to reach out to us, if you have any questions, thoughts, or other topics that you'd like us to explore on the show, you can find us on Twitter at TEConnectPod. You can also email us, techconnect@bluestarinc.com. All right, well, let's wrap up with our recurring segments. The first is our value to the VAR. This is where we kind of like to take our conversation, wrap it up, put a little bow on it, give a little takeaway for our fellow VAR listeners here. So, I kind of want to ask you guys, without giving away any, obviously, the secret sauce of what you do you have any kind of tips, advice, best practices for other VARs that are working in the channel? I always think of this idea of, hey, if whatever we do and whatever we share can kind of help us all elevate and get better at what we do to make, our ecosystem richer for everybody that's in it. So do you guys have any tips? Todd, I'll let you start off this one.
Sure. I guess just because I'm in the sales side of things, the one thing I've learned through my career is just to listen. Right? It's important to listen and try to get to understand what the pain points are, what is the issue of the day for that person, and what they're complaining about. So if I'm a VAR and I'm listening to some complaints and they say, I just had trouble finding my stuff, or my ERP system is continuously wrong. Why is that happening? Then maybe that's an area from what our conversation was today about talking about asset tracking to them, and getting them to kind of go down that route. But so for me, it's all about listening to complaints, listening to what's tough and what's going on in your customer's business.
Awesome, Mark. What about you? What kind of advice and tips do you have?
I think that one of the approaches I have in solution selling and in any kind of new technology or something that may not be as familiar is to find a small problem to solve, to do a proof of concept. Find an area that you can, build a relationship or build some goodwill in that new technology and build on that from there. And I found that works really well. And that's an approach that, CDO has, which I think has been really helpful, is just go in, solve a small problem, maybe something that is a little bit more urgent, and keep the ball rolling from there with that client and try and build on that success.
That's good stuff. And I'm going to parlay on that a little bit here because, we have resellers that are listening to this that some are in the AIT, understand RFID, but some aren't, like POS guys and gals out there, digital signage folks, networking folks. The fact of the matter is I think that there's some opportunity here to be had in RFID. And I would advocate that, what is the best practice? Get to know this technology, get to know a little bit about it. And as we've preached on here many, many times, work out your partnerships. CDO is a great partner. If you're a POS reseller and you've got some high-end retailer that you're working for and they're trying to get more into RFID, you can lean on people like that and partner up with great folks like that so that you can absolutely listen to what their needs are, develop a proof of concept around something, and now you're opening up a whole new world of what you can sell and the types of technologies that you can bring to the table. So that's where I would be on something like to this. I'm excited about the technology and where it's going to go in the future. Got to know it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and I mean, I think the bottom line here too is I like what Todd said about just listening and asking questions and understanding what's going on and not being afraid to say, hey, I have an idea for you. It may not be the right solution, but let's talk this through. Let's figure out what works for you. I'd love to sell you this fancy, awesome new RFID system I've got, but maybe what you're trying to do, barcodes is simple enough, and that's okay. It's okay to do that because I think you lend some credibility to yourself, to your relationship with somebody when you tell them like, look, I'm not going to sell you the most expensive thing I can,
right? Just
because I want to. I'm gonna give you what you need for your operation.
That's solution selling. Solution selling isn't saying, hey, take this.
Exactly right. It's not. It's not buy this because I've got it. It's what do you need? What's going to work for you? All right, this is what's going to work for you. So that's what I'm going to sell you instead.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And again, I think there's some opportunity here that any kind of reseller and any kind of technology reseller needs to understand what RFID is all about, what it can bring to the table, because you're going to run into it. Yep. I don't care if you're a small retailer or whatever, or if you're just hanging digital signage. I mean, people in a warehouse, or if you're doing that, they're going to want to know productivity and what's going on and how can I track these items, and having knowledge about that can only help.
Well, to your point also, you mentioned like a POS vendor, for instance, who maybe is focused on that. Well, how many times have we talked about omni-channel?
Right.
And talked about how e-commerce is changing the game. And if you're in the POS world, you need to be prepared to have those conversations
100%.
about what's happening behind the scenes, what's happening in the back room. Well, that stuff involves inventory. That stuff might involve asset tracking of some sort. So whether you like it or not, what you are doing is probably connected to something that is in the AIT realm as well.
And if you don't know it, call Todd.
Exactly. That's what we're using.
Todd can help you out, and Todd will get Mark in.
Exactly.
When he needs to.
Yep. Mark might have brought them the lead to begin with. So,
That's right.
Well, let's wrap up with our favorite segment, What's Tech Connecting with You? This is where we talk about some kind of technology, something in the world of science and tech and innovation that has caught our eye, that has got us excited and interested right now. Mark, I'll let you start. What's Tech Connecting with You right now?
I don't know. I've always been intrigued at management of information and using Zoomable. They're called Zoomable user interfaces, along with 3D technology to store information and create, knowledge stores and figure out ways to access data in a more efficient way than the typical 2D windowing type of environment.
Yep, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I like that kind of stuff.
3D information. I don't know. Yeah, I need to learn a little bit more about that. We talked about it briefly on one of the podcasts.
I know we talked a little bit about like digital cloning once, like for manufacturers or warehouse folks or whatever that maybe want to be able to kind of get a feel for what's happening in their facilities if they're working from afar or they have multiple locations. You can kind of do a digital walkthrough of somewhere by having a 3D model that's built out for it that you can kind of go through and check out what the line looks like, spot maybe inefficiencies. So there's some very good practical uses.
Yeah.
All right. Todd, what's Tech Connecting with You right now?
Well, something that I've always been interested in is kind of science and space exploration. And so I don't know if you've been following that Ingenuity copter that's up on Mars right now.
Absolutely.
Had a little chop a couple days ago,
Yeah, I guess it had a little issues, but I guess it completed its 6th mission of flying for what it had to do. And it's just fascinating to know that we can actually control something autonomously from 200 million miles away, and it works, right? We're getting beautiful pictures back of the planet, and it's just incredible that it all works.
Yeah. Oh, I missed the story. Did it have a little hiccup or something?
They had some
ran into some turbulence.
It kind of had a little hiccup with its flight for a moment and kind of looked a little dodgy for a minute, but they got it smoothed out and got it landed again.
One of those kind of moments.
I'm sure there was like this. There was probably like a good couple minutes where they're all sitting there mission control
white knuckles on the consoles, like oh no.
Right. So I have a feeling it will happen, but I really want to see I really want to see humans on Mars in my lifetime. I think that'll happen. It feels like we're getting pretty close to that at some point in the next couple of decades we should be able to land on Mars.
Put somebody up there.
I think I don't know that we're going to be full on colonizing anytime soon, but I want us to see us do that. I think that'll be a cool new frontier. Maybe get people as excited as we were back.
You're not volunteering for a one-way mission, are you?
No, I am not.
Is that a volunteer?
I mean, don't get me wrong. I would love to go to space and do this kind of stuff. My wife would kill me. Just even she's already said our son is not allowed to even think about being an astronaut. She cannot handle that. I'm like, I think it'd be awesome,
well.
but I don't know that I'm the first one to do it. Maybe I'll let a few other people go, and once we've determined it's quick and safe and easy, I'll try it out too.
Not the moon first.
Your gun would be an RFID gun and some tags, and you can scan and apply tags to equipment and everything else.
There you go. Put the CDO logo on them. Yeah, we'll do that. Yeah,
those are some high value assets up there. That's all I got to say.
I would hope they're tagging and tracking that stuff.
Yeah, no doubt.
Dean, what's TEConnecting with you right now?
All right, so Baidu rolls out paid driverless taxi service in Beijing. So my question to you, sir, is: would you take a driverless taxi? I mean, we've talked a lot about autonomous cars on this show, right? And it's one of those techs that are teching with us guys, about this whole driverless, full automation of a driverless vehicle. But it happened. So this headline's from May 2 of this year. Chinese tech giant Baidu rolls out paid driverless taxi service in Beijing. Now, it's only a square mile. So, it's not like this thing's taking you from downtown out to the suburbs.
Probably not high speeds or anything.
Or anything like that. But there is no driver. So you get into an empty car, I guess, and you've plugged in where you need to go within that mile, and it goes. Would you do it? Are you in?
I think in that small area and probably not at a high velocity, yes. I think I could handle that.
Okay, so we're only going like 20 miles an hour.
Right. Like I don't think I'm, as much as I want, automated cars to be a thing, I'm not ready to jump in one that's going to be speeding down the expressway with all the semis and the idiots that don't know how to drive.
Yes.
Because there's too much variables of other people that I don't like.
So you're still not there. Mark, Todd, are you guys getting in a driverless taxi? If you hopped in and there's no driver there, are you still going or are you bailing?
Mark, I'll let you go first.
Can there be someone that looks like a driver behind the wheel, just like a dummy?
Right.
As long as it doesn't look like a crash test dummy, that's fine.
Yeah, right. Yeah. If it has something like that, I'll do it. But not just the invisible man.
You still need a driver. How about you, Todd? Do you need a driver? I don't know.
I guess I figure it's going to work at some point. I guess one of my concerns right now is just just today about more hacking going on, right? They hacked into some meat production plants, right? Yes. They hack into those guys in the Colonial Pipeline. Can they hack into the car system? So how safe is that going to be? Because that'll tie up a whole lot of traffic very quickly.
Oh, man. Well, we've already heard about people hacking into cars because they're computers now on wheels.
Yeah.
We've already heard that people can hack them.
You can kidnap someone.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly.
So
you get a high-value target in there, reroute them to somewhere else, lock the doors.
So the taxi that you scheduled to go to the theater, a couple blocks, suddenly you're for ransom.
It's taking you to a warehouse on the edge of town. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, we can put some RFID in there.
A new ransom demand form. That's exactly right. That'll be the next thing.
Yep. I can see it now. That'll be the next headline. And man. Yeah.
Not good.
Here's the good thing, though. All of us, I'm going to assume, are not those kind of high-value targets.
Right.
I'm not going to be getting into one of those taxis and they're going to be going, let's kidnap that
John?
guy. No, never mind. Let's just let him go. He's fine.
What's TEConnecting with you, John?
All right, here's a great headline for you, especially because we've been talking a little bit about cryptocurrency and Bitcoin.
Oh, yes,
and
yes.
We had our episode last week that we talked about how absurd the cryptocurrency thing is.
Right.
British cops thought they were raiding a weed farm, but found Bitcoin instead. This is
give me the
fantastic.
Give me the second subhead under that
So,
one.
law enforcement in West Midlands put out a statement about the case late Thursday explaining how, as at least from the outside, the mining operation showed all the classic signs of a canna farm. Lots of people were visiting the unit at different times of day, the officers wrote, before adding that the warehouse had lots of wiring and ventilation ducts visible from the outside. When they flew a police drone over the building, they also found a considerable amount of heat being given off by whatever was happening inside. So they busted down the door of this place, and all they found
thinking it was a weed farm.
Thinking it was a weed farm. In fact, no one was actually there at the time either. And, and all they found was just the banks of data computers, the data setup or whatever.
Just a bunch of computers
bunch
trying
of hard
to mine
drives
for cryptocurrency.
mining for cryptocurrency.
Oh, good God.
And apparently this was the second time this has happened to this same police department. They have encountered one of these. So they busted the place. Now here's the thing. Obviously, I think in the UK, canna farming is illegal, but at least not, with any kind of, guidance or whatever or purpose. But Bitcoin mining isn't. However, where the problem did lie is they were stealing electricity from nearby buildings and
Of course
homes.
they were, because it's such an energy hog.
Exactly. And that's the other part of it. We didn't really talk about this when we were talking about, cryptocurrency last week, is there's an enormous environmental impact.
Oh, yeah. That's why Elon gave up on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were in, now they're out. Because of all the energy it takes to mine
that's
this
insane
stuff.
that they, part of the reason why they thought this might have been a weed farm was because
of the heat signature of the building
energy. Yeah,
I love it.
exactly.
The heat signature, the technology, the ventilation that was going there. It's got to be a weed farm. No,
Oh, man.
they're just mining crypto Bitcoin.
I kind of, you gotta think they're probably very disappointed. I'm sure they are like, yeah, we're gonna go in here, we're gonna be on the news, we're gonna, they
Right?
love to set up their blocks of drugs on the news.
Yes.
Look at what we did.
Yes.
No, they have nothing to show for that.
No,
really.
nothing.
Like,
yeah, all those months of activity, I'm sure. Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah, well.
So yeah, hilarious story. I love
That's
it.
a good
And
one.
I love that it actually was not the first time that it happened to them. So
Fair enough,
they've been
fair
to
enough.
Before. Well, Todd Muckerheide, Mark Wyatt, thank you both so much for being on the show. We appreciate having you today.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank
Yeah,
you
it's
very
great
much.
being here.
Thank
Yeah,
you. Yes.
thank you.
Yeah, great conversation. Again, if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to us. But unfortunately, it is time for us to unplug. So for Dean Reverman, I'm John Martin. Until next time, stay connected. Trying to help your customers open or reopen safely with social distancing and infection control protocols? Elo offers touchscreen solutions to help with employee access, guest check-in, self-service, and much more. Their modular platforms increase safety, eliminate paper-based processes, and reduce the cost of visitor management. Elo also provides thorough cleaning and disinfecting guidelines. To learn more, visit Elo's microsite on BlueStarInc.com or contact your Elo representative. Interested in selling RFID solutions but aren't sure where to start? Zebra has you covered with a full portfolio of RFID hardware and support services. With growing applications in T&L, manufacturing, healthcare, retail, and more, RFID improves supply chains, streamlines inventory management, and improves online order fulfillment. To learn more about Zebra's line of RFID readers and printers, visit the link in the show notes or contact the Zebra team at BlueStar.